Hey guys, welcome back to MyJewelryBench.com. Today we're going to be restoring this beautiful Hamilton 992. It's got a few issues. It has a broken mainspring. It's a little scuffed up, so we're going to polish up the case a little bit, get this looking really new. I'm going to go ahead and do a full service on the movement. Also, while I'm at it, there is some spots where it has some dried oil that hasn't been taken care of in years. The Hamilton 992B is a beautiful example of a quality 21 jewel railroad style watch. This particular model has a really nice 10 karat rolled gold or gold filled case. It has a bar over crown, which is a very desirable case to have for most of these high-end Walthams and higher-end Elgins and Hamiltons. So you'll find these bar end or bar over crown type cases occasionally. As they get scuffed up and worn, people seem to be like melting them out for their gold-filled content, which isn't quite a lot of gold in there, but you know, gold the way it is, the prices today, you can get any little bit you can. I guess it's worth it. Here you can see I'm decasing the watch. I'm going to remove the two case screws that hold the movement into the frame of the pocket watch case. The watch doesn't look like it's running, but no, the mainspring is completely broken, so we're going to have to go in there and pull it out. Next thing I want to do is, once I've got the movement out, I'm going to take out loosen up the dial screws. There's only two screws in this. Third one looks like it got lost some long time ago. I bought this watch from a dealer who didn't know what to do with it, and he just thought he'd make a little money on it, so I decided to take it. It's got a little bit of glue on top of the dial, so we're going to go ahead and clean that whole dial and get it all out. Here you can see I'm removing the hour wheel, and now I'm going to remove the cannon pinion. I lost my cannon pinion tool somewhere in my bench, so I'll have to go find it out. You can use a pair of tweezers to pop that off. I'm going to loosen up the screw for the balance cock. Put that aside. Be very careful pulling the balance out. I'm pulling the balance out completely. This watch is relatively clean, amazingly. I didn't have to clean the balance jewels. It's in pretty good shape. Again, be very careful with that. You don't want to drop that. Now I'm going to move on to the pallet fork bridge, and I'm going to loosen the two screws that hold that small little bridge in place. You can see I use a foam pad that keeps everything safe and free from breaking. We'll pull these two screws out, put them aside, put them in our parts tray. Once we do that, we're going to very gently remove the bridge from the pallet. And I'll pull the pallet fork out, and we'll get that ready for cleaning. I'm going to pull a ratchet wheel out for the mainspring. That is a regularly threaded screw. If you've been watching my videos over time, you know that the next one I'm taking out, which is the clutch ratchet or the clutch wheel, that is a reverse thread screw, so you want to be careful. If it's very tight in there, go in there and just be very gentle with it and loosen it up by turning it clockwise. Put that screw aside, make sure you don't lose it. Those are hard to replace. We'll pull out these two gears. These are the winding gears. We'll put those aside. Get ready for cleaning. Once that's done, next thing we're going to do is remove the screws for the half bridge. But first I'm going to do the quarter bridge on the lower part of the train, and we'll get that off. You can take either bridge off first. It really doesn't matter. The gears are going to kind of come out one way only anyhow. I'm going to put the two screws for that half bridge or that quarter bridge over there on the parts tray, and we'll put that aside. Here you can see we've got a nice, beautiful movement, very well marked Hamilton. Sorry, I didn't get it in focus. I'm going to pull out the escapement wheel. We'll loosen the three screws holding a half plate on or half bridge. There are three screws on that. I almost forgot to loosen the third one here. You'll see that in a moment. Gently loosen those up. This watch is very, very tight. I'm not sure why somebody tightened it so much, but it's not going anywhere. We'll put these in our parts tray. And I like to keep all the screws and the bridges together with the parts that they go with, just to make sure that everything goes back the same way. And here's that third screw I was talking about. We'll pull that off, put that in our parts tray, and then we can gently lift off this plate. Now this bridge plate is very clean. It comes off relatively easy. I got lucky with this watch. It's in pretty good shape. The gears are relatively dirty, but we can fix that. Now I'll pull out the second wheel. This is the second hand wheel or the third wheel, and we'll get the clutch system out. The clutch system is made of 3 parts, so we're going to have to disassemble that and clean it because it's got some dried oil on it. While I'm at it, before I go to cleaning, I'm going to tighten up the dial feet screws. Again, the third one's missing on this. I probably have a replacement somewhere, so we'll deal with that when we put it back together. Checking the setting gears here and the lever just to make sure everything works good. Now we're going to pop off the mainspring cover. And these just gently pop off. You just turn them, twist them, pry them up. Just be careful not to damage the barrel itself. It's hard to tell that this is broken, but you're going to see here in a second. I'm going to pull out that arbor there. And as I pull out the arbor, you can see I'm going to lift out the spring, and you can see it's broken right about in the center. And there's the other half of our broken spring. The barrel actually looks pretty clean. We're going to go ahead and clean it anyway. I like to soak these in some grease remover. This is the new mainspring. This is actually a vintage mainspring that I had brand new. And they're packed with grease and oils, and they tend to dry up over time. So I recommend, if you're going to use an older spring, even if it's good, clean it first by degreasing it and then clean it in the ultrasonic cleaner. Pre-grease it or pre-oil it before you put it in the barrel. So here I'm getting my winder, and I'm just making sure I've got the right size winder. And I'm going to put that in the winding tool. Get that situated here, and we'll get the mainspring put into the mainspring winder. We can start winding it up and get it ready to put into the barrel. Now, I usually don't wind a mainspring like this in front of parts. I tend to do this, someplace else where I'm not going to have the spring fly back and hit something and knock it off my bench. I'm just doing this to show you this is how we wind a mainspring. Once I get it just about there, you can see it's got a T-end. There's 2 little notches, one in the top part of the barrel, one in the plate of the barrel. Those little notches hold the mainspring in place and seat it tightly so that it stays wound. And here you can see I'm just kind of pushing it down into the notch here. And I'm going to hold it in place once I get it seated, and then we can release the mainspring. It can be a little tricky, so once you get it in place, just pop the mainspring winder out. You push down the mainspring actually into the barrel. It'll gently unwind. Again, it's a good idea to hold that little T-end of the mainspring so that it doesn't slip out when you release it. I'm putting the arbor back in. The arbor only goes in one way, so we'll get that seated, and then we'll lock it in place with the hole that's at the metal or the center of the mainspring. Once that's seated correctly, we can go ahead and put the plate or cover back on the mainspring barrel. Again, I'm a little out of position here, guys. I apologize. Okay, on to the next step. I'm going to gently put some oil onto the clutch system. I've got that clutch cleaned and assembled, ready to go back into the watch, so we're going to do that next. And I've got the clutch in, and now I'm just going to lightly oil all the pivots from the underside of the plate, because this is the best place to do it right now. Some of these have cap jewels on them, and I won't be able to get to those after I assemble the watch. So I'm going to start with the mainspring barrel. I'll move on to the escapement wheel. We'll get that seated in the watch correctly. Be careful with these. They're very gentle gears. Now I'm just trying to make sure it's seated in the hole of the jewel, and it is. Now I'm going to work on the third wheel, which is the wheel that the second hand attaches to. We'll get that situated in its right position. Sometimes these are fun. I always forget how nice it is to work on a really good quality American pocket watch. These watches are just made so well, especially Hamilton's, great watches. Once I get that third wheel situated, we'll move on to the second wheel, and we'll put that in position. Kind of rotate it here so we can see it. And last but not least will be the main gear, or main wheel. Now I can work on the half bridge. This bridge goes on over the clutch, the main wheel, and the second wheel. It's going to hold the barrel in place also. We're going to seat that. And I like to take a dry oiler, and I'd like to tickle my gears just to make sure they fall into the pinions. And we'll just double check everything, make sure that plate is, or that bridge is tight. Once it's tight onto the plate, I can go ahead and put the 3 screws back in there. And we're going to tighten these up, but not totally tight. I like to leave things just a little bit loose as I'm assembling, and that's always just in case there's something that doesn't get seated correctly. With those 3 screws in position, we'll go ahead and screw them down about 90% of the way. So depending on the watch that you're working on, you'll have 2 or 3 screws per bridge, and this is pretty common. With that done now, I can work on the quarter bridge for the other 2 gears. I'm just testing the wheels here, making sure everything's turning very freely. We'll get that quarter plate on, or a quarter bridge, and now this is a little more complicated because these gears are a little bit smaller, a little harder to maneuver it back into position. Again, I'm going to take a dry oiler and I'm going to tickle these gears, just move them back and forth until they fall into their jeweled pinions. Once that's done, you can go ahead and put the 2 screws back in this bridge. You can see that this takes a little more time to get these seated correctly. And if you have to go to a microscope or just do this out of camera, which I sometimes do, you'll go ahead and do that. Just make sure everything's seated correctly and that it's in position really well. And now I'm just going to test everything before I screw that plate down or that bridge, because I want to make sure the gears are free. Once I know they're free, we'll go ahead and put the 2 screws back in that quarter bridge. That bridge is going to hold, again, the escapement wheel and the 3rd wheel. I'm going to tighten these down. I'm pretty happy with the way everything's working. Again, I'm going to just push these gears, just make sure they're free. There's a little bit of friction here, but I think that's the foam pad causing the friction. Usually I know it's the foam pad causing the friction. I'm going to go ahead and oil everything that I've missed before. We'll do both the bottom and upper side of the watch movement, and just give it very little oil just to make sure that everything moves freely. And here you can see, holding it up, these gears move real free and gentle, and that's how they're supposed to move. There should be very little friction on these. I'm going to go ahead and oil up the upper side just to make sure that I don't forget later. Don't need a lot of oil here. Again, there's cap jewels in position, so when you see a cap jewel, you'll either have to oil it from the underneath or take the jewel set apart. In this case, this watch was very clean, and I didn't really need to take those jewels out. They just needed to be cleaned and oiled. And again, I'm going to give it a test with the oiler just to make sure that everything moves freely. I'm just going to put a drop of oil on the upper balance jewel, making sure not to touch the hairspring, because if you get any oil on the hairspring, that hairspring is going to stick to itself and it's not going to run right. Again, I'm a little out of position here, but I'm inserting the balance and balance cock back into the watch, and this is solely for a test. I want to make sure that I can test the balance and make sure it runs freely with no friction, either face up or face down. And once I'm happy with that, I can go ahead and assemble the whole watch. So I'm going to gently tighten this down, making sure that the balance is free. And now I'll just tighten this all the way down just to make sure that there's no friction. I use my hand blower just to turn that balance back and forth. I'm going to check it face down and face up. If one of the jewels or the balance jewel sets is dirty, you'll get a little friction and it'll want to stop. You'll see it, you'll notice it. If it moves very freely like it is here, the jewels are cleaned and properly oiled. I'll let that run for a little bit and then we'll remove it and put the pallet back in. Again, you can see how beautiful these Hamilton watches are. They're just nice movements. Very good to work on, very fun to listen, run. I used to wear one a lot when I had my jewelry store. Here I'm just going to gently remove the balance out of the way. We'll put that back in the parts tray, and we'll focus on the pallet fork here. So now you're going to place the pallet fork, the pinion for the pallet, in that jewel, that upper jewel, and then we're going to give this a little bit of oil. This is a cap jewel on the bridge for the pallet fork. Well, one thing about these 992s and 992Bs, they do seat very well, so you tend not to get too many parts that kind of fall out of place. But you still want to be careful, because if you break one of those pinions, these parts are getting harder and harder to come by. and it's harder and harder to fix them because of that. So now I've got that bridge in place, and I'm just going to put one screw in. I'm going to tighten it down about 80%, and we'll go on to the next screw, and we'll tighten that one down about 80%. And again, being very gentle and very careful. I don't want to break the pallet fork. I'm going to hold that down, and every once in a while you'll notice I tighten a screw, and after I tighten a screw a little bit, I check the pallet fork to make sure it's moving free and to make sure that I haven't caused any damage. What you don't want to do is over tighten that. You could either break a pinion or break a jewel, and if you crack a jewel, the watch is never going to run perfect. In this case, everything is in very good shape, so I'm being extra cautious here. Once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and tighten up all the screws and make sure that everything is nice and tight and working freely. And once I'm happy with that, we'll move on to the next stage. So now that everything's tight, we're gonna throw in the winding gears here. This is the clutch winding wheel. Remember, this is the reversed threaded screw. So when you tighten it down, you're actually going to turn it counterclockwise to tighten it down and make sure that it is in tight. You don't want to over tighten it. You could fracture the screw, pop off the head from the screw base, and you'll be in big trouble trying to get that fixed. Next thing I'm going to do is put the barrel ratchet wheel in, and we're going to just move that click out of the way and gently turn the ratchet gear until it falls onto its keyed position. And once that's done, we can put the screw in to hold that ratchet wheel in place onto the mainspring barrel. The arbor of the mainspring actually has the threaded part for the screw, so that all intertwines and connects on opposite sides of that half bridge. And you can see I'm turning it counterclockwise to tighten it up. And once I'm happy with that, we're going to go ahead and give this just a little bit of a wind. Once I've got a little wind on it, I can check or test the pallet fork and make sure that it clicks back and forth on its own with a little bit of pressure from the escapement wheel. When that's done, we'll put the balance back in. We know the balance is clean and it's free, so there should be no issues here. Once I get that in position and seated correctly, that balance should take off on its own. You can see once it fell into place, it just wants to run. And I'll put the balance screw back in, or the bridge screw back in for the balance cock. And we're going to hold that down ever so gently and tighten that screw in place. Again, the balance wheel is something you want to be cautious of if you're going to try this at home, because you can cause damage to either the upper or lower jewel set as well as the balance staff. I'm going to wind this about halfway, and this is always a good time to just make sure everything's working. I'll run it upside down, face up, face down, sideways, just to make sure everything's working. Before I go and do any timing, here's the micro adjustment for the speed of the watch. And what I want to do, because this was set over in the fast position, most likely because either the spring was getting worn or just dirty, somebody had moved it over to make it run a little bit faster. I'm just going to set that in the middle, and then I'll do my test. Before I do that, I'm actually going to connect the cannon pinion back onto the watch, make sure it's intertwined with the setting gear. There are 3 setting gears in this watch, and we'll get that all positioned correctly. I'm going to go ahead and loosen up the 2 dial feet screws that are on this movement. I couldn't find the dial screw for the particular movement I have here, so I'm going to leave the 2 that are in there. We'll just keep those the same. Here's the hour wheel. We're going to put that back in place, and we'll put the dial washer on. The dial washer makes a little pressure between the dial itself and the hour wheel to hold it in place. I'll get this dial seated. You can see it's nice and clean. I've gotten all the debris off of it, and we'll tighten up those 2 dial screws to hold the dial feet in place. So there's our movement. It is running very well. I'm going to go back out and polish that case up and clean it and make sure that it's ready to have the watch movement cased. Again, cleaning the watch out and cleaning the case, make sure everything's dry before you do it. We're going to go ahead here and we're going to start casing up the watch movement. And I don't have the hands on at this point. I'll put the hands on before I put the front cover back on. That way I don't cause any damage to the hands while I'm assembling the watch back into this case. So we'll put the 2 case screws back in, one on either side of the movement. They go in nice and gently, and we're going to tighten these down so it holds the movement solid in the frame of the pocket watch case. Okay, I'll get the back cover on now. Back cover goes on relatively easy once it's cleaned, and like I said, I've cleaned and polished it. I'm just going to wipe off any fingerprints or any marks on that, and we'll work on the front now. So this is the stage at which I'm almost done. So what I'm going to do is pull that lever out, because that's the setting lever, and we're going to put one of the hands on the movement. This is obviously, I start with the hour hand. You can start with the second hand, but you can't put the minute hand until you get the hour hand on anyway. And I'm going to set this to here. In this case, I'm going to aim it right at the 9 marker. And then I will grab the minute hand and we'll put that in place and just aim that right at 12 so the watch indicates 9 o'clock. Once the hands are in position, I'm going to go ahead and test the hands and make sure that there's no contact between the hour hand and the minute hand and that everything works freely. Once I'm happy, here you can see I'm just setting it to 12 o'clock, and I'm going to put the second hand in now. Be careful with this hand. You don't want to apply too much pressure. You're going to push that straight down until it's seated. It doesn't have to be too tight. It has to be tight enough so it doesn't pop off. And you can see here it's just running with the watch movement. So guys, that's pretty much it. I stuck this on the timer. It was running about 15 seconds slow. So I sped it up a little bit and got it running about 2 seconds slow a day. That's not bad for almost a 100-year-old watch. I think the watch is in very good condition. If you're interested in a watch like this particular model is for sale right now. I don't know if it'll still be for sale by the time I put this video up, but if it is, go ahead if you're interested to let me know what you think you're interested in paying for it. I'm kind of asking $250 for the watch, so it is a good deal for this particular model. I think you guys would like it if you wanted to have one of these in your collection, or even if you're a retailer and want to sell this in your store. These Hamilton 992Bs were very good quality watches. They run very well. They have a good long history of accuracy, and this watch in particular was very well maintained. You can see by the movement it runs very well, and it's nice and clean. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing. And if you're interested in taking any one of my other courses, I'm offering a jewelry course right now. If you're a member of my YouTube channel, you can get that for $10 a month and learn everything there is about jewelry design. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day and enjoy winter.